the quality that I had, which I feel is most important in the function, is the ability to build rapport really quickly and to earn trust really quickly, because everybody's going to have their guard up no matter what you're selling. So if you can overcome that in a shorter amount of time, that's going to ultimately set you up to win the sale. So some of those things came more naturally to me, like in growing up. I was always like being very friendly and just always kind of building rapport with all types of groups of different people. I was in band. I played on the football team, so I learned how to interact with different types of people too. But the trust factor is just the biggest piece that people need to learn, and that's what a buyer looks for. Is if they're going to sign, they want to know that they could trust you, and that has to happen earlier in that relationship.
I love that you just said rapport and trust, because those are literally the two words that I tell people whenever they're going into interviews. I'm always like, the main things you have to do in this interview is build rapport and build trust. It's kind of crazy that you pulled those same two words out. And I think most people are focused on all the wrong things when they are trying to sell themselves or build their career or something like that. They're focused on like being right. They're focused on sounding intelligent. They're focused on looking good rather than actually connecting. And this like prevents people from asking good questions, or prevents people from being curious, or even just getting out of their own head and thinking about the problem they're trying to solve for the other person, right? And so I think that's one of the biggest shifts and one of the biggest positives of being in sales, or of doing sales at some point in your life, is that, you know, there are metrics that salespeople have to hit, right? So it is about you. But if you only think about hitting your metrics, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot, right? And so like, how do you sort of maybe help people learn how to put the customer first in some ways?
Yeah. I mean, the metrics that a lot of early sellers hone in on or prioritize are the end metrics of a closed deal and the revenue that's generated and how many closed won deals I had for the quarter or whatever it might be. But there's so many interesting activities and engagements and events that occur prior to a closed won deal. And all of that can be measured with a really well thought out process. So things that, for example, if you have a focus in a job interview on building rapport and trust, the end goal becomes getting the job, but there's 10 steps that have to happen before you get the job, and rapport and trust would be the first and second. And so if you start to measure the more of the intangibles in some way, where I can check off and say, hey, I feel that I did develop a rapport in that first interview. And the questions that they're asking me now, I do feel like I've earned the trust of this hiring manager. If I start to measure myself on those, and I have a really specific formula that I'm following there, it becomes a little easier to remove those the non-tangibles and focus less on the end and more on the process.
Yeah. If you could break down the process, what do you think maybe the phases are of building trust, getting into someone's good graces, and then getting a sale? What would that sort of arc look like? Is it different every time, or are there kind of, typical patterns that emerge?
It's definitely different every time. The trust and rapport for sure. If I feel like I get to a point where we're having kind of impromptu dialogue or impromptu interaction, if I can get them onto a texting level, like a buddy, that's when I know I've earned the trust and rapport, and that means I could actually start to push a little bit more in terms of urgency. That means I could push a little more in terms of like what I feel like they should be buying, and then kind of go from there. But the underlying piece that's happening along the way is the value. So have I shown them the value that this is going to help them? Have they had their light bulb moment? And did I recognize when that moment happened? And so that's kind of part of the arc. Additionally, from there, it's when the buyer is asking really specific questions and buying questions, and I've recognized that they've actually been talking about it internally, and there's a clear movement happening. That's part of the arc too, because I can't go and forecast a sale until I know all of those things have happened. but that, I would say those four things are probably the most consistent in terms of that process.
Yeah, and I want to dig into that value piece a little bit. Because I think that's also something that people struggle with in both selling themselves to become salespeople and in just the general job search overall, right? Like the kind of cliche I always make is like Nike doesn't say buy our shoes so that our shareholders can make more money, right? It's a terrible sales tactic. And so like for us to say like buy this product so I can hit, you know, my benchmarks or you know, hire me so that I can get mentorship and a paycheck. Obviously, like these are things that we think, right? Everyone needs money, everyone needs a job, everyone needs a paycheck, but we have to present ourselves as problem solvers, and not just using the word I solve problems, but like being specific about that and really connecting with the needs of the person that we're talking to. And so what are some of the things that have helped you showcase that value quickly, or maybe not even quickly, but like most effectively through your years in sales?
Yeah, so we could break it down in two parts of a sale and then trying to get hired for a role. So the value starts very high level. So from a buyer buying a software, they know or they've recognized or they've read that they need to implement X software because it does Y. And so they've kind of high level realized that's what they need to go out and buy. The value point is when they not only realize that exactly what they're going to be able to solve, but they start to have the light bulb moment of this is the company that's going to be able to solve exactly what I'm trying to do, and they've clearly outlined the value that aligns exactly with what we're doing. So it becomes less of the high level, we need this tool, to we need X company to be the solution. And the same thing happens from the value that is produced and created within a candidate or someone looking to get a new role. The hiring manager goes out and creates a job description. They know that they need to fill this specific type of function and role. The value and realization of that hiring manager is when they decide that the person I'm talking to is the value and is the epitome of exactly what I'm looking for. And that person has demonstrated the value so that it aligns with their goals with the business. So there's definitely parallels between the two. But I think it's when it comes into that more like funnel version of this is the specific exactly what I need versus, that general initial thought.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important to keep in mind, because it really does kind of connect. It almost takes the pressure off in some ways, right? Like if it's about, if your whole goal is to be impressive or know everything or like have every answer, you're going to get too caught up in your head trying to like mitigate every situation. But if your goal is to be helpful and solve problems and like understand and ask questions, it really does shift things. And I think that that's one of the things that people don't realize about sales. They don't realize that learning this skill doesn't make you some weird, creepy Wolf of Wall Street, con artist. It makes you stronger. It makes you more confident. It makes you someone who can advocate for yourself and the things that you want to do. And people are really scared, especially if they've never done sales before. They're really scared to pick up that phone, to send that email, to make that call. And I almost wonder, and we can start digging into like the changes that have happened over the years, if the pandemic and the isolation and the lack of interpersonal contact has almost made people even more nervous about it. And one of the things that I've learned about sales is that, I'm an introvert who's super anxious. So like when I started even just trying to get people to take free movie tickets, I was like sweating on the phone talking to these people. And but over time you build a thicker skin. And I think people don't always realize that like it does work. Like you will build that skin over time. And I'm kind of curious, what does the process, I think people think that salespeople are just confident from day one. And it's, from my experience, that's absolutely not the case.